You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi guys, it's me again, Steve Adams or Mighty Blue, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. I've been in a bit of a tiz this week. I'm moving this coming Wednesday, which is actually yesterday if you're listening the day this comes out on Thursday. So I'm trying to kind of front load the episode ahead of my normal deadline. That said, it's another fairly long one with our interviews, our reading, and today, 2 middle sections. Our main guest today is another of those people we could never do without. Dave Fleischman is and has been a through hiker of the AT and the PCT, but he's also been a trail maintainer for both. He shares stories about his hikes, but also about some of the incredibly logistically rich stuff that goes into building a trail. Listen out for his paddling those steps at New York's Bear Mountain. It's quite something, believe me. Dave will be along soon. We've also got John Zaccone this week. Do you remember that app I referred to last week, where you can log your walking miles, wherever you're walking, and see your progress on a map of the AT? I just passed McAfee Knob this week. John will share more information about that after Dave. Our very own Mr. President, Bill Tickner, will be on after John, and having been in a heatwave last week, he hears about a local tornado warning as he's hiking through a storm in Connecticut. Finally, Fozzie hits the majestic Grayson Highlands, where he finds peace and quiet, a bunch of ponies and a violent storm. But first, let's hear from Dave Fleischman, or J.I.F. Well, I'd like to introduce Dave Fleischman, or J.I.F. Dave is a long-distance hiker and a trail maintainer. Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm doing great, Steve. So happy to talk with you.
Yeah, and nice for you to. You actually wrote in, said that I should consider chatting with a trail maintainer, and then you were telling me about what you'd done. I thought, well, you've got quite a lot of hiking experience as well, so I thought I'd invite you on the show and tell us about both hiking and trail maintaining. And you've actually had 2 different trail names, haven't you? Tell us who you were before you became J.I.F. and why you're now J.I.F.
Okay. So 1991, I hiked the Appalachian Trail with then my wife, Letitia.
Yeah.
And we started the trail, and we'd heard about trail names, and nothing was really happening for a little while. We started talking about it, and I don't know. I've listened to you talk about having sleep problems on the AT. I felt like for the first 10 days, all I did was sit up at night and listen to the owls. And I didn't get any sleep. That's what I felt.
Really? What, hang on. Why is that?
A couple things. I think, number one, I was super jazzed. I mean, I was just so excited about being out on the trail. But I just was having a hard time. Actually, when we started the trail, I think both of us had some kind of cold flu going on, which was difficult, to start a trail like that under those conditions. And I was just so eager to start hiking in the morning. I just had a hard time sleeping. I don't know what it is.
There's no doubt about that. It gets exciting, doesn't it? The whole thing is exciting to do. But frankly, I found that I just wore myself out. And I sometimes fall asleep at 5 p.m. I was so exhausted.
So I became the owl.
Yeah.
And that was, so now she doesn't have a trail name. And she's starting to get a little annoyed with that. And so I was suggesting things. And, she loves cats. We had a cat. And I thought of this poem called The Owl and the Pussycat. And I said, well, how about you be Pussycat? And she's like, yeah, I like that. So we kind of became a group name or a couple's name of The Owl and the Pussycat.
Nice. Kind of cute, actually. But you changed it. You became J.I.F. What does and J.I.F. actually is J.I.F, isn't it?
Yeah, J.I.F. So,
right. So tell us
why
you made the change.
Confused with the peanut butter.
Oh, right. Yes, of course. Yeah.
Which everybody
so
said,
tell us why you
like
changed
the peanut butter.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, you do eat a lot of peanut butter on trail.
Yes. So in 2016, when I decided to hike the trail for the second time after just retiring from teaching, the reason is because I'd been a trail maintainer for 15 years on the Pacific Crest Trail, and I wanted to see it from a different perspective. So I decided, well, I don't want to be owl anymore because that was part of a trail couple. So I said, let me go out there and see what happens. So I had a few suggestions along the way, and things like, oh, well, you're hiking the second time. Oh, you're second timer. Oh, you're old timer. I was like, no, I don't like any of those. I'm not. This is
the danger of letting people name you, by the way.
Yes. So I got to so about 450 miles in. I still don't have a trail name, which I'm okay with. Just using Dave. Actually, Dave. And in the registers, I'd sign a trail gorilla hiking the trail, because that was the group of maintainers that I work with.
All right.
So I get to, there's some very well-known trail angels on the PCT, I'm sure, just like the AT. One of them is the Softleys in Agua Dulce at Hiker Heaven. And I know these people because they've hosted our trail cruise, and I've become friends with them. Uh-huh. So when I got to the Softleys, Donna Softly is there. She greeted me, and she was so excited. And she called Terry and Joe Anderson, who are 24 miles away up the trail in Green Valley, and told them that I was there at Hiker Heaven. Mm-hmm. So they were probably expecting me the next day, because a lot of people do the 24 over to Casa de Luna at the Andersons. Okay. But I hadn't told Donna that I was actually going into Los Angeles for 3 days to put together my resupply boxes for the Sierra. So every day, Joe was like asking hikers, and there's a lot of hikers come in to Casa de Luna. It's a lot like Hiker Heaven. It's a fabulous stop. The people are amazing. So every day he's asking people, have you seen this guy, Dave? Have you seen Dave? And a lot of hikers stay at Casa de Luna for 2 or 3 days. So they're every day hearing Joe ask this question to new hikers. And finally, one of them says, Joe, we don't think there is any Dave. He's your imaginary friend. So I was like, so the third day, or I think it was the third, or maybe it was the fourth day, I show up. They live about 2 miles off trail, and it's very easy to get a shuttle or a ride from people, locals, into their house, because everybody knows the hikers and they know the Andersons. So I come out of the car, and Terry's sitting there on the porch, and she sees me, and she yells into the house, "Hey, Joe, Dave's here." So Joe comes out, and he looks at me. He gives me this like surprised look. He's like, "What the heck, man?" And then he's like, he turns to all the hikers. He goes, "See, he is real." So they wanted to call me If for imaginary friend. And so I added the J because I thought that was a way of honoring Joe, and also it just seemed to make it more complete.
So you became Joe's imaginary friend. Jeff. Excellent. I prefer Joe's imaginary friend. That's much better. So, and going back to the AT thing, as I understand it, you were introduced to through hiking when you were actually at the RPH shelter. What happened there? You suddenly saw someone you didn't know such a thing existed. So, what was your mindset at the time when you were at the shelter?
Well, it was our first. So my wife and I, at the time, we hadn't done any backpacking yet. Well, we'd done a trip in the Adirondacks, but we got home and we were like, let's do a hike on the Appalachian Trail, and we picked this hike that was fairly close to our house. And so on the first night, we are hiking 5 miles south into RPH cabin, which was a house. Yes. As we came to a clearing. And right now, you told me that the other day. I had no idea that was actually somebody's house. It was a house.
Tell us about that.
A little bit dilapidated, to be honest with you.
Yes, is now.
So it has a concrete block part, which is still there, and that's the part that they maintained as a shelter. But there was a wooden part attached to the left of that, and had a living room and a kitchen. And I remember sitting in the living room on the couch. And anyway, we got there, and like we said, there were about people hanging out. There were a couple of cars there, and there were people hanging out and sitting around. We were like, I don't think this is the shelter. This is someone's house, and we're kind of looking and creeping around. And finally somebody saw us and said, "Hey, you guys come on over," and they took, and so it turned out, there were through hikers there, but we were kind of shy at that point. We didn't mingle with people too much that night. It was getting late. We got in our tents. It was the next day hiking through Fonsstock Park down to Route 301. And we stopped for lunch along the way. And I remember we were sitting there on a rock. I was trying to remember the guy's name and I just couldn't. But anyway, we're having our lunch. It's a lovely day. 3 hikers come up from the south and we say hi, and just curious. Hey, where are you guys coming from? And they said, "We're coming from Georgia." We looked at each other like, wow, that's a long way away. Where are you going to? And they go, "We're going to Maine." It's like, okay, you're hiking the AT. Wow, that's so cool, Well, they were very lovely people and decided to have their lunch while we were having ours. And they just started regaling us with stories, and of their adventures. And as soon as they left, the 2 of us just looked at each other and said, "We got to do this."
Wow.
And then that was July of 1990, and April of 91, we were at Springer Mountain.
How were you able to do that? So I believe you were in your mid-30s or early 30s at the time?
Mid-30s.
So how were you able to just put your life on hold? And I'm often fascinated, by the way. I know the youngsters these days, they're happy just to quit their jobs and get a job when they come back. But in those days, that was the time when you were starting to be at the peak of your career, if you know what I mean, weren't you, in your mid-30s? What was your situation then?
I was really fortunate. I didn't have to deal with the stress of, leaving a job and then having to find a new one when I came back. I was very fortunate that I had a partner in a welding business. He was a guy about 20 years older than me. And when we decided to become partners in this business, we talked about our priorities. And I'm not sure I even knew at the time that, I'm not 100% sure if I had in mind to hike the Appalachian Trail. But one of our priorities was that, okay, we're going to work hard. We're going to build this business. But we want to have time off to do the things we each love. And at the time,
that is so forward thinking.
Yeah.
I almost can't imagine that nowadays. This was the rapacious 90s, wasn't it, really, when people were just trying to tread on each other. So you actually had a business, the business that you both said we should both be taking sabbaticals?
In a way, yeah. I guess that's what it was. So I think he first told me, said, "Look, I'm really starting to hate the winters in New York." So he said, he had an airplane, a little Cessna. He liked to fly. Right. And so he said, "I'd like to go down to Florida and spend the winters there, and you work at the shop here." And I thought about it. I said, "Wow, well, then when you come back, I could go hiking."
That's awesome.
And he's like,
so awesome.
Perfect.
Man, you are lucky. I've never heard any other hiker ever tell me that they had such a perfect position. So you literally went on your hike, came back, and then took over while he sodded off down to Florida again or something like that.
And
amazing.
What was even better was every time one of us came back, the other one would hand an envelope with money in it. So, it's like, okay, here's what I made while here's your share. And so it's like almost like we were making money while we were on the trail. It wasn't, in a way, it was definitely a less stress situation because I knew what I was going back to, and I really enjoyed him and the shop and the work we did.
What a wonderful opportunity to do that. But you decided to go, and you were going in the early 90s, which it's way before the ultralight movement started. How on earth did you research gear without the internet? Because, ladies and gentlemen, there was a world without the internet. Who would have ever thought that? And whose advice did you take? How did you learn what to do?
So I had met a guy. I was going down to the Y and swimming a lot in prep for the trail and doing a lot of hiking with my backpack. And I met a guy there called Second Wind. And this guy was kind of a low, we have these trail legends, and this one is way back because he's from like the 80s, late 80s. He was an ultralight hiker. and he made his own pack, I believe.
Wow.
So I met him, and one time, and I had read about him in like the Appalachian Trailway News or something. They had done an article about him, and I was there, and I was like, "Hey, are you Second Wind?" Mark DiMichele, I think was his name, and he's like, "Yeah." So I started talking to him, and I got some advice from him. But you're right, there wasn't a lot, but okay, this is kind of a funny story. I would devour anything I could find on the Appalachian Trail, but there wasn't a lot, compared to what there is today. So one of the things that was out there were two books that I knew of, besides the Rodale Press, which I didn't get that one. But there was Cindy Ross's book about her journey on the Appalachian Trail. I think you've interviewed her.
I have, yes.
Yeah. And then there was Ed Garvey, who wrote Appalachian Hiker. You familiar with that?
That's right. That was the main one, yeah.
Well, he was like my guru, kind of, even though his hike was so very different because, he had such a supported hike. He worked for the Forest Service. He had people meeting him with steak dinners all the time. But that was one of my key inspirations, I guess. And the funny thing is, I got to meet him at Trail Days that year.
Nice. How nice. Yeah, it must have been nice for you.
What's really funny is we saw him. He was sitting on a tailgate of a truck, and he had a bunch of hikers around him. And I said to my wife, I said, "I think that's Ed Garvey." And she's like, "Well, why don't you go introduce yourself? Talk to him." And I was like, no, I don't think he'd want to talk to me, So she kind of dragged me over there and actually introduced me to him. Told him, "This is my husband. He's read your book like 3 times." And
okay.
I don't know.
That's kind
I
of
guess
cool.
I was a little trail infatuated with some of the legends. But
so what did your pack weigh then when you started at Springer?
Oh gosh, we didn't. We tried to make our packs light, but I don't think that there was like that wasn't the overriding at all. I think my pack, probably with about 4 days food, was somewhere around 40 pounds.
Oh, that's not bad at all in those days.
But we would carry 40 to 50.
Yeah, I'm not at all surprised. And as you say, on that hike, you went with your wife. And I've often been fascinated by spouses that hike together. How was it for the two of you? Did you find it an easy transition because you were with her 24/7 for 5 or 6 months, I guess? How was that?
Well, I would say for the most part, yes. But, there were things like, as you said, you're with this person 24/7. And we tended to hike together, too. We didn't really separate very much.
Right.
So, there'd be stressful situations. Weather, of course, can make you kind of irritable. And then
Yes.
Differences in hiking styles. She was really good in the morning. I was kind of sluggish, but by mid-morning,
It's because you hadn't slept all night.
What's that?
It's because you hadn't slept all night.
Yeah.
It could be why.
I remember early on some of the things just that would really bug me was, okay, so we kind of picked certain jobs. So we'd get to camp and she'd be usually the one to set up the tent while I was kind of getting dinner ready.
Yeah.
But she would like pick a site for the tent and I'd look over and I'd go, "Oh, that doesn't look very level, And so, so I'd kind of mention that. And she's like, "What do you mean? That's perfectly level." And, so we'd have...
hadn't you learned by then you don't mention things to, when the other person is doing something, you don't then try to second guess them. It never works. Either men or women. Men or women. Yeah.
And another one was getting up in the morning. I am like, when I get up in the morning, even though I may not have slept well, and that changed, Steve, that changed. I'm like, I can get out of bed. I can get up and be out of bed like that in a second. And then she's much more lays around, needs time, So I remember early on, we'd be like, I'd get up, and I'd start moving a little bit, and she'd go like, "Don't even think about it."
Oh, dude.
So you have to find compromises there, but
I'm going to say the trail would teach you a compromise, wouldn't it, if you didn't already know it? Because you'd have to compromise. I've reflected on this a few times with people, but, I hiked with a guy called Trigger last year. He and I were polar opposites in absolutely every respect, but we got on great on the trail. We respected each other's space, we respected each other's opinion, and we just got on with it and make sure we worked well as a team. And I guess you have to do that when you go with your spouse as well. It was almost like Trigger was my trail spouse. But one of the same sex. So, but after you went on the AT, obviously you got the bug because you went on the long trail, I believe in 1992, and you'd already done 100 miles of the long trail, obviously on your AT hike. How did you find the northern part of it? Was it very different to the bit you already done?
Yes, absolutely. The northern part of the long trail is more like New Hampshire, the Whites in Maine.
Oh, wow.
Extremely rugged, but back then, probably less well maintained. So you are, and if it's raining, you're just fighting through brush a lot. I'm sure it's changed quite a bit. I'm sure there's much better maintenance now. But it's rugged. It's incredibly rugged. And starting in the north, we were doing a Canada to our house back in New York hike. It was around 500 miles that summer.
Nice.
And the last day was, even though it was 20 miles to our home, I think only about 7 miles of it we were walking on roads. I found trails to walk to get back to our house.
That is cool. That is really cool. You were probably doing proper orienteering, weren't you? You were using a compass and things like that.
Not so much. But that hike, starting in the north, it's kind of like people that do the John Muir Trail. A lot of them start in Yosemite and hike south. Yeah. Because of the elevation builds. Sure. So it's kind of the same thing, except that we did it the harder way. Starting in the north, you're dealing with a lot tougher elevation and terrain.
Yeah, that's why I can never do sobo on the AT. I need to get my leg. I need the first 1,700 miles to get my legs for New Hampshire and Maine, I think, get my hiker legs ready. And I'm not sure if I had this right, but you told me, I believe, that you put together a slideshow at the time and you used to go to Alder, a gathering, and do presentations, and you spent about $2,000 on equipment.
Yeah, I mean, two projectors
do it with your phone now.
Yeah. Two projectors cost me $1,200. I bought really good Kodak ectographic projectors and a dissolve unit, and this was the way you did it back then.
Yeah.
And
what was it about the gathering then that kept you coming back?
I was thinking about this today because I went out and hiked this morning and listening to your podcast of On Your Journey. On your 2019 hike, I've been listening to that. And I thought, I enjoy so much listening to Mighty Blue talk trail with people. And, we don't get, once you're not on the trail anymore, there's not a lot of people that want to listen to you too much about that all the time.
I give people advice, Dave. I tell them, when you get back home, everybody's going to want to hear your stories for about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Then they're going to want you to shut up because their eyes will glaze over and say, oh my God, he's not talking about the trail again. And really, you are right. You're looking for someone to talk to about it, aren't you? I think this is why I do this show, actually.
I could totally see that. So the gathering is the brainchild of Warren Doyle, who back in the 80s felt this very same thing we're talking about. Hikers need to be able to relate to each other. And he started this thing called The Gathering. I ended up there in 1990, the year before my hike, because of a customer at my welding shop gave me a flyer. He had been hiking the Appalachian Trail in sections with his young daughter. And we had somehow started talking about that when he'd come in to visit me at the shop. And I was doing work for him. I think he had a landscaping business. And so he gave us this flyer and we looked at it and said, oh, we should go to that. And we did. And
25 years.
I just remember, first of all, I remember showing up there and there's a big field that we would all camp in. This was up in New Hampshire. At Dartmouth College, but there was a field about 5 miles away we camped in. And people were, would be seeing each other as they drove up and got out of their cars, and they'd be hugging and we're just sitting there like, well, nobody knows us, but so we're just here. Well, that night, Friday night, they had a program at the college, and they started out with a slideshow. And the lights went down. There was music and slides, just absolutely stunning photography, music that just, went so well with it. And when the lights came on, the two of us both had tears in our eyes. And I remember saying to Letitia, I said, if I could do something like that, even 1/10 of that, and have people react that way, I would be so happy, with what we could produce. Because I would love photography, and just didn't know where it would take me. But so the gathering, it's just a place to see friends every year, and you may not see them for a year, even 2 years or more, and then they show up, and it's just like you're like right there again with them.
Yeah, and then you did the PCT after you'd done the AT. I'm actually not going to talk about that right now, because before you went on the PCT, you'd become a trail maintainer. Where were you maintaining trail? Was that on the East Coast or the West Coast then?
Yeah, so in '92, I was still in New York, and
all right.
And I got in touch with the local trail club, New York, New Jersey Trail Conference, and said I'd like to help maintain the trail. And so I went out with this guy who was an overseer of a large section, oversaw other maintainers. And I worked with him that day, and I said, I'd really love to maintain a section trail. And he said to me, well, we probably have a waiting list of people who actually want to do that.
Sure.
And then, I don't know, like a week later, he called me. He said, I have a section for you. He said, you seem really enthusiastic. And so I ended up with a section north of the RPH cabin, a little further north, Route 52, up to Depot Hill Road Shelter, or Depot Hill Road, which had a shelter. There was a shelter in that section, but I wasn't a shelter maintainer. So I had 5 miles of the trail that I maintained for probably 6 years or so.
Well, funnily enough, we're recording on the 23rd of July. This won't come out till the end of August, I don't think. And today's guest was another trail maintainer. I think I used to want to get trail maintainers on the show. And when I got your email, I knew it was somebody else. I knew I wasn't be interviewing another maintainer. It's a mindset that you seem to have, and something you said in the email struck me about not that many people give back as trail maintainers. Is that getting worse, or is that getting better?
I think it's getting better now.
Right. Okay. That's good. And really, what are the protocols for a maintainer? Do they give you a section? Well, they gave you a section, or they make you part of a team? And what could people expect if they pitched up at their local club now and said that they wanted to get involved in trail maintaining?
Well, first, usually they're not going to hand you a section right away, generally, unless they have one that's so hard to get to that nobody wants it. But yeah, they want to make sure you know what you're doing.
If they give you one early, you should be suspicious. Is that what you're saying?
They want to make sure you know what you're doing. There's standards the clubs have, and there's all different. You can be a trail maintainer. You don't have to have a section that you maintain yourself. You could just work with a bunch of volunteers that go out on a regular basis if you're available. I was listening to your podcast with another trail maintainer, and it's true that most of the trail maintainers are in their 60s and older, because the retired folks have a lot more time to go out and do this, especially during the week. When I joined the Pacific Crest Trail crew, I was the youngest. I was like 40-something, and I was like the baby.
And you worked with your dad, didn't you, in trail maintenance at one stage? You talked to me about putting together a bridge across a creek.
Yeah, so I had been maintaining that section of the trail in New York and getting more involved with the trail conference, and so the people that were head of that whole region approached me and said, hey, would you be interested in, we know you're an engineer, would you be interested in helping us build a bridge across this creek? It's not on the Appalachian Trail, but it's in the Hudson Highlands, not far from the AT. Right. And I said, sure. Yeah, let me have a look at it. So, and then I thought, well, my dad's a civil engineer. I was a mechanical engineer. And I thought he might be really interested in helping me with that. So we went up there. It's just outside of a town called Cold Spring, right along the Hudson River. And
Sure.
it was a great project. As soon as we looked at it, there was this giant boulder on one side of the creek and then a sloping ledge on the other. And that was the perfect spot where we thought we could build our abutments, and we had to drill into the rock, and we also had to actually submit plans to the state park engineer. So my dad was a civil engineer, and he could stamp them, but we had to get final approval from the state park engineer.
Sure.
And so it was a real bonding project. And my dad he loved it. He loved working. I got a bunch of trail runners that I ran with, and they helped carry stuff up and helped us build the bridge.
And I think listeners, when they go on a trail, you see things, and I always recall the steps up and down from Bear Mountain on the AT. The work involved in doing that must be monumental. The man and woman hours put in there. It is an amazing amount of what you guys do. And one of the expressions that you use was, and I think I possibly even have this myself sometimes, you develop trail eyes. Is it you see things that you can see how they did it, or you want to know how they did it?
Yeah, absolutely. So a friend of mine who hiked the PCT in '93 and also hiked it again in 2016. So we saw each other both years, and he's also a trail maintainer up in Northern California. Nice. He had coined that, or told me, trail eyes, when I was telling him about, I want to see the difference. I want to see the trail through a different way as a maintainer. And he said, yeah, it's called trail eyes. So, and what's interesting, you mentioned this section in Bear Mountain, which, I would hike every time I go back, because I live in California and I go back east usually every at least once a year in the fall, my favorite time of year to be there. And I hike Bear Mountain. I hike a whole section through there, and I've watched that project from beginning to end as it progressed. Wow. And I actually got to work on it. Massive, isn't it?
It's just massive.
One year I was on a PCT project in the Sierra, and working with the SCA, the Student Conservation Association. And one of the guys there was going to be, after that, going to New York to work on the Bear Mountain project. And I'd heard about it. I said, I'm going to be there. Could I come out and work with you? And he's like, sure, come out for a day. So I got out there, and Steve, they've got these things called high lines, right, which are cables that they string through the trees. Like they'll start at a base, they'll tie off one end, they'll secure one end, and then they'll bring it up to a high point in a tree, and then they'll run it like 50 feet or 100 feet to another tree, and then down to the ground. And when they slack this cable, it comes down to the ground. They can then, and they're doing this, they've got a rock quarry, and they have people, all they're doing all day long is splitting rock for steps. It's fascinating. Jeez. The amount of work that this takes. And then they will attach this rock to a sling and then to the cable. And when they tighten it, it will rise off the ground, and they'll then pull it with a pulley along this cable and then bring it to where it needs to be. And they had multiple high lines set up like this. And I mean, it was this was like a 10-year project, I think, 10 or 12 years.
Yeah. How many people are working on a project like that then? And in a team, how many people will be out there on one day, say, doing that?
Well, you've got the SCA crew, which was like, so what the New York, New Jersey Trail Conference did is use this as what they called Trail University to train the next generation of rock workers.
Wow.
So on a weekend, they would probably have maybe 10 volunteers and maybe a crew of 8 SCA out there. During the week, I don't know. It was such a gigantic effort, and the result is this.
I'm sure it is.
I mean, I call it artisan trail work.
Yes, and you know what? I perhaps It's a bit too simplistic to say it. I felt it was like being in Mordor in Lord of the Rings, walking up those rock steps. It felt like you were approaching this vast fortress up these hundreds, what seemed like thousands of steps to get to the top there. And I remember thinking on the way down, especially on the way down, actually back, on the north side of it, how long that must have taken to do all those steps. There's hundreds of them going down, aren't there? Just literally hundreds of them. And it's an amazing job. So that was your trail maintaining. I'm going to ask you one more question about trail maintaining in a minute. But in the interim, in 2016, you mentioned this already, went on your second PCT through hike. How different was that from your hike of 20 years before? Or did it just feel the same?
No, it felt very different. I mean, first of all, I feel really privileged that I got to hike the trails. First of all, 93, there were 60 of us that started the trail that year. 60.
Wow, yeah, that's changed.
Now they have
lot,
60 in a day. Well, not quite, 50. They limited it at 50, but
right.
and only 15 of us finished. So about the same 25%.
So was it much more social when you went in 2016 then?
It was more social. Like I mentioned, I'm a very early riser. I would get up in the morning and start hiking, by first light or slightly before. And I was passing people, 20, 30 people a day. And I'd stop and talk with each of them. I asked them their name, where they're from, So I do enjoy that. I don't think we saw anyone. We didn't meet another through hiker until 75 miles into the trail in 93.
Wow. That's something. So not even just with your wife. You were just with your wife for that period of time. That really is. But that's something. I went in 2014 and 2019, and I felt things had changed a lot in that period as well. So to hike the same trail 23 years apart is quite a bit. And I know you were hoping to complete the Triple Crown this year with the CDT. Was that an easy decision to make, though, once you realised what was going on with COVID?
I think it was easier than most people because, number one, I'm retired.
Yeah.
I don't have to give up my home. I have people that rely on me, depend on me, and that's a good thing.
Sure.
So going out there wasn't a hard decision. It was disappointing, to be sure.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But I think I was in a better place than a lot of people who, may have already sold their homes and their possessions, and then have to figure things out, make it much harder.
That's the thing that's really struck me this year. The class of 2020, wherever they were going to go, and for a lot of them, this was probably their one shot, and they just couldn't. A lot of them just couldn't do it. Will you go next year? Do you think? That's
my plan. But it's funny how when this whole virus thing started back in I guess February when I kind of put it at I think there's a 10% chance I won't go.
Yes.
And and then it came 50%, and by March it was 90% chance that I'm not going.
Yeah.
And then shortly after it was 100% chance I'm not going. Yeah. So,
but you can go next year. You can go next year because you're retired, as you say. Now, I want to finish with one more question about trail maintenance, and there may be no answer to this. So, just tell me, what do you want people to know about trail maintenance that they may have misconstrued? Because it's not for everybody, I'm sure. But what does one get out of trail maintenance? What does it give you? What satisfaction does it give you?
Okay, well, as far as satisfaction, most of my trail work that I've done, except for the last 4 years, has been while I was still working. And I was a teacher.
Sure.
And teaching, and I taught middle school in inner city Los Angeles. You don't come home every day, this feeling of wow, what I did today was great. I'm so proud of it, But when I do trail work, and I really love doing either brushing or tread work or rock work. And at the end of the day, usually we would walk back over what we had done to get back to wherever, whether it was our cars or our camp. And there's an incredible feeling of satisfaction. It's like, I did that, or we did that, and it looks great.
Yeah.
And hikers are going to get to enjoy that so much more because of what we did. So the satisfaction thing is very big. What I would say to people is that trail work's hard, I mean, some of it, if you're cutting tread all day, man, that is some of the hardest stuff. I think of people in prison breaking rocks with sledgehammers. I mean, it's hard.
That's what made me think about cracking rocks in a quarry, yeah.
But there's usually other jobs on the trail, and it doesn't even have to be. So one of the things we have, our group is called the Trail Gorillas, and we have people. We would do these 10-day projects, which was great. I love these things because you really got to bond with people and just experience it in a whole new dimension. But you need cooks, you need people to buy food, you need planners. Mm-hmm. There's all kinds of ways to get involved that don't involve breaking your back. So, you could get involved in so many different ways as helping trail maintenance. And you asked me about the PCT and the difference. One of the biggest differences between 16 and 93 was the maintenance. I remember very vividly in Southern California crawling through brush, and after coming through a section and looking down and seeing red ants like on my pack and on my pants and having to brush them off. And I remember I was already a year of a maintainer on the AT, and I'd scream out, maintenance, where are you? It's like thinking that the effort on the PCT was the same as the AT, which at that point it wasn't.
Right.
But because of people like who I still work with, I mean, these are trail legends. This guy, Pete Fish, amazing guy, did the trail over a 3 or 4 year period, at the same time I did it, and almost as single-handedly responsible for the condition, betterment of the trail in the last 20 years.
Well, I can tell you, having done just the AT, I tried to do the John Muir Trail twice but failed, unfortunately. But having done the AT, I always think to myself when I'm walking through there thinking, how on earth these guys do this? And we are so thankful. We may not appear to be thankful sometimes, but we are so grateful to you guys. So I really thank you for writing to me and telling me about it. I'm glad we had the opportunity to get you on the show because you've showed us a different side of trail maintenance perhaps we wouldn't have otherwise known. So thanks very much for coming on, Dave.
Oh, you're quite welcome. I just wanted to mention one thing because one of the things I think it's a great question that sometimes I think you ask is, what's your worst day or best day on the trail? And you talk about, how emotions run just like highs and lows that in normal life, they're spread out more, but on the trail, they seem to be compressed. My worst day on the trail, and I'll talk about the AT, my worst day on the trail was south of Bears Den Hostel. And it's funny because I was just listening to your podcast this morning and you were getting there. Yeah. Well, I think I was it's about 30 or some odd miles before, and I had developed a blister, and then on top of it, kind of like healed over, but it was still there. I forget what you call it. Anyway, I remember, so in the morning, wake up, and it had been really bothering me. And on this particular day, it was excruciating. And I kept thinking, I think I'm going to have to get off the trail. This might be infected. This could be really bad. Your mind starts running all over the place,
Oh, yeah. And you second guess yourself all the time as well, don't you? I hate that.
Yeah. So we hiked 11 miles that day, and I don't remember the shelter, but we get in there, and there was trail magic that had happened, but they were packing up and leaving. And I really needed trail magic. And so I think they said, oh, we feel so bad. I think we have a couple of baked potatoes. So they gave us a baked potato. But the real trail magic happened about, I don't know, half an hour later. This guy, another hiker around us, his trail name was Blades, because he was an amateur hockey player, and he was also head of some kind of surgery at Boston General.
All right.
And he carried the biggest medical kit, first aid kit I had ever seen anyone carry on the trail. Well, he lanced this thing for me. He wrapped me up and he said, you need to take it easy for a couple days. And then he went on. So he was my trail angel. That was really the trail magic I needed. Well, the next day...
Trial provides.
So I say that's my worst day because all day long I really thought like, oh man, I think my trip's over, you know. The next day I put on, it's funny because, you know, I had one hiking boot on, and on that foot I wore these racing flats that I used for camp shoes. So I had this boot on and this racing flat. So it looked like my feet were distorted because you have this big boot and then this little shoe.
Sure.
Well, that day we hiked 24 miles into Bear's Den Hostel and I felt great. And I walk into Bear's Den Hostel and there's Blade sitting on the couch and he looks at me, he goes, I don't believe it. And I think I did like a bow to him and just said, because of you. And that was like my best day.
Awesome. Best day and worst day. Fantastic. Well, look, lovely talking to you, Dave. And I'm very, as I say, I'm very grateful that you guys do what you do. And I thank you for coming on the show.
You're quite welcome. It's been wonderful speaking with you, Mighty Blue.
Take it easy.
Take care.
Bye. What an amazing business partner he had. That does not happen very often, but what an arrangement, and very far ahead of its time. And what about building those stairs when he was only just visiting the area? What an accomplishment. And you can only really know what I'm talking about if you've ever gone up and down those what seem like thousands of steps. That is something. But Dave wasn't finished. When we cut at the end, he told me something else, and I said, say that again, and press record.
So there were 3 trail maintainers, long-term trail maintainers on the PCT that decided to hike the trail again in 2016.
Right.
And we were all actually met up. We were together in Agua Dulce at the Softleys at Hiker Heaven, which was a wonderful thing. The thing I want to say is that I didn't know it at the time, but I was suffering from clogged arteries.
Oh, blimey.
Well, I got off the trail, or I finished the trail in the last day of August in 2016. And shortly thereafter, you know, I go back to my Palm Springs home and I'm running trails there, and they're very steep trails. And I start getting chest pains on the climbs. And, you know, this is quite concerning to me. I went to see a cardiologist. They did a stress test and he said, well, we don't really see anything, you know. And I'm like, well, I didn't really get the symptoms, but I still think there's something wrong. He's like, well, you might have a little blockage, but it wouldn't concern us. We wouldn't do anything. Well, it's another few months go by and it starts getting worse. And long story short, I ended up having a double bypass.
Right.
And what I found out was that while I was going through this, that one of those same other maintainers had the same thing happen to him. I think he had a triple bypass surgery.
Jeez.
He was wondering, why am I so slow on the trail? Which I wasn't, by the way. I mean, I could move along quite well. There were times when I look back and I can see why I felt the way I did. But I bring this up because, you know, there's older hikers on the trail. And if you ever are experiencing anything like that you got to get yourself checked out. I'm really lucky because I think if I didn't have symptoms, things could have gone a lot worse for me, or if I would have tried to ignore them.
But you got yourself checked out and they ignored you. They said you're okay.
Yeah. And I knew
weird.
I wasn't. I knew it. I had to push because this next time I went to my doctor, they asked me, do I want to go see this same guy again? And I said, definitely not. You need to send me to somebody really good.
Yeah, I would think so.
Is not
I would think so
listening to
as
me.
well.
Yeah. Anyway, since then, I mean, these guys are miracle workers that fix me up because I'm back. I mean, I'm running and hiking and
Good for you. Good for
don't
you.
have any qualms about going out on the CDT when I'm finally able to.
So be warned. Pay attention to your body. It will rarely lead you wrong. Now, John Zaccone. I wanted to talk to John again after I got that message from Vicky Thomason last week. Here's John. Well, this is John Zaccone. Hi, John. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
As I've just told the listeners, I came to You and I spoke a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, and I said I'd try out, walk the distance. And irony of ironies, the very next day, a lady called Vicky Thomason wrote to me saying how much she values this app. So I thought I'd have you come on the show, especially as you're about to do a promotion for the app as well. So firstly, tell us, what was the genesis of this app?
Well, I just really wanted to create something where people can experience the trail and on a sort of daily basis. It actually didn't start out with the Appalachian Trail. There's other walks out there like the Boston Marathon and New York City. But what I found was people really liked the Appalachian Trail and they really wanted to complete it. So I completely focused on doing that and providing that in the app. And it's been sort of caught on ever since I started doing that.
And it has. And I'll tell you why. I say, when we first spoke, I thought to myself, because I'd already downloaded the app some time ago. One of my other listeners had written to me and said, you should check this app out and perhaps talk to the guy on the show. And I thought to myself, and I didn't really use it much because I've hiked the trail in 2014 and 2019, I didn't think it was for me. But once we spoke and I started looking at it, there's so much there, and there's something about it which grabs a hold of you. Since COVID started, I've been walking every day locally. I'm doing about 45 miles to 50 miles a week, 6 and 7 miles every morning. And to see your progress actually on the trail, it is surprisingly addictive, isn't it? Are you and there are lots of people out there, aren't there?
It is, yeah. It's definitely a good feeling to sort of see yourself move along the map. And I think for someone like you've done the trail before, you're familiar with the different parts, the different states, and I'm sure you've come across sections and you thought, oh, I've done this before. I remember this.
Yes.
Because I have sort of pictures and some kind of information along the way that you might have connected with as well.
Yes, that is the thing. I'm very close. I'm quite close to McAfee Knob right now. I'm 650 odd miles into it or something like that. So when did it first come out, the app?
So the first state was published in like 2013.
Oh wow!
So
quite a long time.
It takes a really long time to find all the pictures, to find all the information, and put that stuff together.
Sure.
We're trying to do the same thing for the Pacific Crest Trail now.
Nice.
And we're maybe about a quarter of the way through. But I mean, what happened was, users were walking the sections faster than I could publish them.
I'm sure they were.
So I think last year, 2019, my mom, who helps me with a lot of the content and the writing, we just sat down and was like, we need to finish this thing. I mean, we were, I think, up to Virginia at that point, and we just put our heads down and got, finished up, got the rest of the states done.
That's what it's like to be on the trail, really, We've got to finish this thing.
Is it? Yeah. Yeah, you get halfway down, you're cranking out the miles, and you get more efficient. I mean, you get more efficient on the trail, and we got a lot more efficient, creating the walks, finding good sources for where we can find pictures and information and things like that. We got a lot of awesome contributions from some bloggers who have taken photos along the way, have contributed their photos. But 2019, so last year was when we had the whole thing published. And then we got some advertisement or some feature article in the Outside magazine, which helped the app a lot. And
currently it's, is it an iPhone app only because of the health app?
No, that's not. Well, the Google has a similar app called Google Fit.
Right.
Since it's two different, I'm the only developer working on the app. So I have to publish them one at a time.
Right.
So I did iOS first, and currently I'm working on the Android version.
All right.
Cool. And that's that hopefully will be done. Let's say before the end of this year.
Are you a hiker yourself, or are you a geek and not a hiker?
I'm a little bit of both.
Right.
I went to Virginia Tech, so I live really close to McAfee's Knob.
All right.
I've done that hike a bunch of times,
Nice.
as well as Dragon's Tooth, which is near there. I've done week-long backpacking trips in Glacier National Park, in Arizona and North Carolina. So I'm very familiar with backpacking. Never done anything longer than
Right.
7 or 8 days, but so that whole through hiking sort of culture and mentality is still completely foreign to me. I can't really wrap my head around what it would be like to hike for that long.
It's great. It's great. I tell you what, John, I was initially reluctant to talk about the app on the show. I didn't want to feel like I was pushing something I didn't really necessarily believe in. But I say, Vicky's email to me really got me, because when you've done it, you think people can do it, but some people just aren't able to get out there. So the fact that she really feels she's experiencing part of it is a wonderful thing, that you've given them the opportunity. And I don't think you realise quite, maybe you do realise already, but how important it is to some people. And I'm sure there'll be some follow up to this, and other people say they've used this as well. And I really, appreciate the fact you're doing this. Do you see the future being other trails other than the PCT, or do you see this going, the Camino de Santiago in Spain and the Terror in New Zealand? Is that something you've got in mind?
Yep, we're gonna keep going. Basically, I go based on what users tell me they want. So
right,
the most requested trail right now is the Pacific Crest Trail, and the rest of the big three there, the Triple Crown, the CDT will probably be the next one. Nice. I get a lot of requests for international trails as well. So that's going to be, it's just, I'm just going to keep adding to the app. I actually have a couple of users who are giving up their own time to contribute and work on these walks as well.
Very cool.
Because they're just passionate about it and they want to see it in the app. And I said, hey, we'd love any help we can get, because we're sort of time restricted. This isn't my full-time job. I have another full-time job that I have. So it's definitely, time is a big restriction for us to be able to publish this stuff. But it's definitely coming.
One of the reasons we're doing this in our very first show in September is you do have a promotion on in September, and not only will people be able to get this, but they'll also be able to support the ATC as well. So tell us what's going on in September for you.
Yeah, so I'm working with the ATC, and we're going to be doing a promotion in September. Mm-hmm. So for the whole month of September, instead of giving money to me, you can give a donation to the ATC to unlock the Appalachian Trail. Normally, it's $5 that you would give to me, but now instead you can give a $5 donation to the ATC and unlock the trail. By the way, you can still give me money to help me to keep my servers running. I plan on adding a little donate to the developer, maybe in the settings. Of course, that's totally optional.
Yeah.
I found that I had it free for a while for the first few months of the coronavirus, and I had a donation link in there, and I had 20% of the users who unlocked AT actually gave me a donation. So it's actually really astounding. It's much higher than I thought it'd be.
That is really nice.
It actually covered all of my server costs, and I was able to keep going. So that was really, really awesome.
Well, I can tell listeners, I'm continually, when I finish the other day I did a 10-mile walk in the morning, which was a lot long for me. And you just suddenly you look at the progress you've made on the trail. You see which shelters you've gone past. You can see a picture of the shelter and words about it. It's lovely. And I was wrong. And so I'm glad to say I was wrong. And it means a lot to people. So I think you've done a great job there. And I look forward to seeing more things in the future. So thanks very much for coming and tell us about it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, man. Take it easy. Bye.
Bye.
I must say, I now check to see where I am every day after my walk, and another listener, Jash, sent me a picture from his phone as to where he was on the trail. He's a couple of 100 miles behind me right now, but he may catch me soon. Take advantage of John's offer and help the ATC. Everyone's a winner. By the way, talking about the ATC, I'll be having Sandy Mara from the ATC on the show very shortly. So if there are any particular questions you want me to ask her, just let me know at steve@hikingradionetwork.com. And talking about Hiking Radio Network, don't forget our new website. You can go and listen to any of our shows you like. There's more pictures, there's more links, and if you want to donate to any of the shows, you can just by clicking a donate button on any of the pages. And I want to shout out to Sarah Sherman this week and Paul Jacobs, both of whom gave very generous donations. I really thank you guys for helping me keep this going. Now, it's Mr. President, and Bill has a great little nugget of AT history to talk about. Right, we're back on with Bill. Hi, Bill. How are you?
I'm good, Blue. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. And there's a couple of things I want to talk to you about. One of which you've been in having had the heat last week. You got yourself involved in a bad storm and I believe a tornado warning. So tell us all about that.
Yeah, the AT's been really testing me lately.
It does that.
Yeah, it really does. So yeah, I've hiked through the Connecticut section since I last talked to you. I think when we last talked, I was on Bear Mountain, just crossing the border.
Yep.
When I got down to where the trail crosses near Cornwall, I literally got a tornado warning on my phone, one of those automatic advisories. And so I thought, just to be safe, I'll hike down this road into Cornwall.
Yeah.
I literally get to a Citgo station, and lightning like you wouldn't believe, and downpour, and it was quite intense. And I'm extending underneath a little, overhang at the Citgo station. And luckily, someone took pity on me and offered to drive me to the general store where I could actually go inside.
Don't you think it's one of those things? You kind of develop this pathetic loser look, don't you? It always helps.
Like a sad wet dog is what I looked like.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but the country store in Cornwall was fantastic. They had a generator that kept their power on. I charged my devices, and I got a great crispy chicken sandwich. So I was pretty happy.
That's good.
Yeah. But, it's funny because on the Guthook app, there are some warnings about some parts of the trail around here that had some tornadoes touch down this year and had some pretty dangerous debris.
Wow.
So I decided to take that tornado warning seriously because I'm like, it could actually happen.
I would not like to be in the forest in the middle of a tornado. I've been in some pretty nasty storms before. In fact, I went with a group called the Fat Guys and Gals Back in the Woods, and we had a terrible storm going up one mountain. And I don't know why, I was excited about it. I was laughing, and there was thunder and lightning, the whole 9 yards, but it was great. I really enjoyed it. But so do you get nervous in that sort of thing?
What's interesting? Funny you said that, because when I hiked the PCT, I didn't really deal with any lightning storms, right? Because there's just not much weather on that trail.
Right.
And when I hiked the Continental Divide Trail last year, you deal with lightning storms every day, So I got to a point where I became a little more comfortable with lightning storms, and I respected them, especially on the Continental Divide where you're above tree line so much.
Yeah.
So when they happen here on the Appalachian Trail, I'm a little less nervous because I'm almost always below tree line. And I feel so much safer than I felt on the Continental Divide.
So with all those trees around you that could be struck by lightning, you're less nervous. Excellent.
Yeah. I would recommend doing the CDT before the AT. You'll be fine then on the AT.
All right. I'll see. How have you coped? But I one of the mysteries of life is how on earth these companies put out that their gear is waterproof. And waterproof, I think, is a designation that means it might keep you dry for about 20 minutes. What have you got that keeps you dry?
So I've got a pack cover. So I think most people will either do like a trash compactor bag inside of their pack to keep things dry, or they'll have a waterproof pack, or they'll do a pack cover. I do a pack cover, and then I do have for my electronics and for my sleeping bag. Those are in waterproof sacks inside the bag anyway.
Yeah.
Because even with a pack cover, it's going to get damp in there. It just does.
Yeah. But what about yourself? I meant on yourself. When it's pretty miserable. Cold rain is about the worst thing you can get, I think. I'd rather have snow than cold rain.
Yeah, I think you're right. Being wet and cold is the worst. And I have a Mountain Hardwear really light shell.
Right.
It's a very durable Gore-Tex, and I update the waterproofing of it, every couple months.
Is that a thing?
So that
hang on. Is that a thing? I didn't know you had to do that. Update. How do you update waterproofing? I didn't know there was such a thing.
Oh yeah, well, I use that Nick Wax. You can get it at at REI or any outdoor store usually,
Right.
and you just wash it with this specific detergent.
Oh, interesting.
And it kind of reinvigorates the waterproofing.
Oh, that could be the reason I got soaked every time I put mine on then. could be nothing to do with me. So how's the hike been this week? Apart from the tornado warning, how's it been?
It's been pretty good. I think you were right. Connecticut was harder than I thought it was going to be.
Yes,
it's a lot
isn't
more
it?
up and down.
Yeah, it is. It's surprising.
Oh, yeah.
You know what? And it doesn't look it on the elevation guide, but I guess that's because you've just come from real mountains, I suppose, New Hampshire, Maine, and stuff like that. But really, it still is quite challenging, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it really is. And coming from Massachusetts, which to me has been the easiest state to hike through,
right? Yeah.
It is harder, I think, relative to that, and
Yeah.
so it is noticeable. But I think the storm distracted me, which is good.
Right.
You don't feel the ups and downs as much when you're thinking about how dangerous the storm could get. And it's not that long of a state. I think it's like 60 miles. So
yeah, we last spoke, I think, on Monday or Tuesday. It's now Monday because I'm moving this week. That's why I'm doing it slightly earlier than before. So how far are you through Connecticut now?
I'm in New York now. I'm in just past Pauling.
All right. Oh, you're in New York. Okay, right.
And so a mile like 750 or so. And and I actually took a day here. And Gulf Trail just to visit some friends.
Well, hang on. Tell us about that, because you've sent me some amazing pictures just now of the place you're staying. That's at your friend's place, is it?
It is. It is actually.
Very nice.
You know how this happens, Blue, where the trail provides good experiences, it provides connection, it provides all sorts of things to hikers, right? And
sure.
And honestly, so I had told a lot of people in my life that I was doing this trail, and a friend of mine, MJ, reached out and he said, "Hey, I happen to have bought the Brayburn Farm in Sherman, Connecticut, which was the home of Ned Anderson. And Ned Anderson was born in 1885. He was one of the people who was promoting the creation of the Appalachian Trail.
Oh.
And then once it was kind of approved, he actually created the entire Connecticut section from Bear Mountain in New York all the way to Bear Mountain on the border of Massachusetts and Connecticut."
Nice.
And he's, I think he passed away in this maybe the 60s, but he made the trail and maintained it and promoted it. And it so happens that my friends bought his farm, and his farm, called the Brayburn Farm in Sherman, it has a bunk room in the attic where they used to host hikers, and people signed this door there.
Nice.
So it was cool. I got to sign the door.
Oh, cool.
It was really neat.
Years ago, funnily enough, I went. This is totally at a tangent, but entirely in keeping with what you just said. I went and played golf at a very old course in the UK, in England, and the Sherlock Holmes books were written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Well, they were anyway. And he was a member of this club, obviously, about 100 years ago. And when a member died, they would just literally strike a line through his name, which was handwritten, strike a line through his name on his locker, and then the next person would write his name on the locker door, and there was Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's name, which was always pretty darn cool to see.
No way.
Yeah. So you signed the door, did you?
I did.
I did. Nice. That's nice.
Yep, so signed it and dated it. I bet. Yeah.
So this guy put up hikers as a service to hikers. I mean, what was he actually an official hostel?
Back then it was. I think the trail was still. I think the trail was completed in 1937. Yeah, and he kind of retired from everything shortly thereafter. But
right.
I don't know if it was an official hostel, but he definitely was really integral in the Boy Scouts in this area and taking people on hikes, not only the Appalachian Trail, but other places. He created a couple other trails as well. Just kind of a really amazing guy. When he passed away, the ATC actually passed a resolution supporting his legacy, basically saying he, confirming how much he contributed to the creation and maintenance of the trail. Which is
That's
really
lovely.
Cool.
As you say, these sort of things kind of happen in this serendipitous way, don't they? You happen to have a friend who happens to have bought the place of a guy who was related to the trail. I mean, you just can't make this stuff up, can you? And you know what? It happens all the time, doesn't it? It happens all the time, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's wonderful. So what are the plans for this week coming up?
Yeah, I'm going to push as many miles as I can. I'm entering the Delhi Challenge section, is what I hear.
Yes.
Where you can hit a deli almost every day.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's nice.
I'm packing a little less.
You'll enjoy it. You're going to enjoy it, I tell you. You know, and you can. And some of these delis, they're aware of hikers as well. I mean, they shovel so much food down you. We stopped there for about an hour and a half on them last year, and we just kept eating. And it was terrific. Just absolutely loved it. Yeah. Well, look,
so
great to catch up with you. And I'm, as I say, I'm moving this week, so I'm sorry to be a little bit rushed, but I'm glad you're doing well. I'm glad you're staying safe, and we'll catch up again next week. Okay.
That sounds good, Blue.
Cheers, man. Take it easy. Bye.
Take care.
How about that? I never heard of Brayburn Farm or Ned Anderson. Mind you, I'd also never heard about re-waterproofing. That might have helped me out over my 4,500 miles on the AT. And if you're actually interested in learning a little bit more about Ned Anderson, I'm going to put a link to the Wikipedia page of Ned Anderson in the show notes. Finally, it's Fozzie and Balancing on Blue, where he starts a sporting contest between the US and the UK, or England, as he'd say. I'll see you next week. Chapter 6, Throwing Down the Gauntlet. April the 24th to May the 8th, miles 309 to 523. I wear a leather strap around my neck with 3 silver pendants. The first is a St. Christopher, the patron saint of travellers, a gift from a friend before a cycling trip to Israel. I'm not religious, but I know he protects me on my travels. The second is a cedar tree, symbolic of the country of Lebanon, where I travelled during a harsh winter in 1995. As I shivered in a snowstorm, a Syrian family took pity and sheltered me overnight. They had a little money, but as I left, the son handed me the pendant. I refused because it had value, and they'd already shown me enough kindness, but he insisted. The third is a Celtic cross, synonymous with Galicia, a province in northwest Spain. Monica, a cook working at the Refugio Ave Phoenix on the Camino de Santiago, gave it to me after I'd rested there. These pendants are my lucky charms, and over 20 years of travelling, I've stayed out of trouble. I hike with them even on a day's walk, a week's cycle ride, or through hiking. I'm safe with them. Sometimes I touch them where they rest on my chest. I rub them between my fingers or place them between my teeth. I sleep with them and keep them on in the shower. They're as much a part of my travels as the associated memories. They also serve a double purpose, being a great indicator of my hiking posture and rhythm. I don't mess with my biomechanics because I believe they're natural. However, I read books on the subject, such as Chai Walking by Danny Dyer and Born to Run by Christopher McDougall, which roused my curiosity. Both authors advocate changing the body's position to encourage landing on the forefoot, proposing that heel strikes cause muscle damage. This results in fewer injuries, faster speed and increased distances. I made 2 adaptations after reading those books, both of which encouraged a front foot strike. I shortened my stride and leaned forward from the heel, imagine a hinge on each ankle, whilst keeping the body straight. When I first changed, it took some getting used to. My body reacted by reverting to my old style. I had to remind myself to change, but with practice it became natural. As well as watching over me, those pendants keep my movement in check. As I lean forward, they swing ahead, and as my trailing leg returns, my body's momentum causes them to hit my chest, chinking an audible reminder. If I'm poised correctly, they stay in rhythm. If I get lazy and revert to my style of old, I lie back, resulting in heel strikes and my pendants fall silent. They sound like loose change in a pocket when I'm running for the bus, and it's a reassuring noise. Others carried similar lucky charms. Corey Rocket Fina from Tottsville, Massachusetts, had a propensity to fall or roll her ankles every day. She blamed losing focus, getting lost in her head and not concentrating. The trail doesn't do multitasking, she told me. 60 miles from Mount Katahdin, she stopped to take in the view and noticed a hawk feather on the ground. The grey with white stripes looked pretty, she said. I tied it in my hair and didn't trip or roll my ankle after. I kept it. It hangs in my apartment and it's in my summit photo, poking out of my ponytail. PJ and I emerged from the woods onto I-26, hungry and sodden from a storm. Bald Mountain Shelter was 5 miles ahead. We lifted our gaze as moody clouds raced overhead. The Little Creek Cafe lay 3 miles away, and Wolf Creek Market Store was a half-mile further. Our imaginations drifted towards a burger and fries. We sat contemplating the options in our hunger as Trooper David L. Buckner from the North Carolina Highway Patrol pulled over. His window opened, giving me the chance to ask a question I'd been pondering for 30 minutes. "Morning, officer. You see that sign?" I gestured to my right. "Yes," he replied, confused. "Well, what does it mean? Read it. It makes no sense, does it?" He faced the sign which stated, "Permitted trucks not allowed." I continued, "If trucks aren't allowed, why are they permitted? And if a truck is permitted, how come it's not allowed?" He scratched his head and smiled, lost for words. PJ shrugged his shoulders apologetically. "He's British. Sorry." "PJ, English, mate, please," I corrected. Trooper Buckner couldn't offer an explanation, but we opened a friendly conversation, increasing our chances of reaching sustenance. PJ, wise to my intentions, whispered, "Fozzie, you can't ask a cop for a ride." I continued, "Do you know what time the cafe shuts?" David checked his watch. "You missed it by a few minutes." "Is the store open?" "Yes, it's 3 miles. I'm not busy and happy to take you there. I can only get one in the car, though. It's full of gear." I debated with PJ and we agreed I should go. "What do you want to eat, mate?" I asked. "Anything with chicken, Fozzie. I need chicken." Not only did Trooper Buckner take me, he waited and took me back. We even discussed the merits of wild food foraging, and he showed me the local plants on his laptop. He handed me a North Carolina Highway Patrol badge before leaving. I respected American cops, and they liked us English tourists. We both made efforts to represent our countries. My accent works wonders when partnered with ignorance about local laws. Play the dumb tourist, and avenues open. However, I do have problems with those in positions of authority. I'm wary of the police because of experiences in England where they'd abused their position. I've never liked being told what to do by my parents, teachers, friends or bosses, and I struggle with it now. US immigration is my worst nightmare, although for once my passage through Miami Airport was smooth. A smashing officer admitted me with 2 months over my visa allowance when he realised I was hiking the AT. Often I find immigration run by rude individuals. Seeing my backpack, they assume I'm bumming around the country with little money looking for illegal work. They can be impatient, intolerant, ask stupid questions without waiting for answers, and believe their uniforms mean power. I don't consider anyone above or below me, and I'm not above or below anyone else. Trooper Buckner was an absolute gem, wished us well, and sped off. As we munched on fries and sheltered under a bridge spanning US 23, we agreed it offered excellent shelter. The I-26 was a small country lane with few vehicles, and the freeway noise overhead was minimal. Honey Badger arrived and we scampered up the concrete embankment onto a flat platform sheltered from the rain. The only hazard of bridge life was taking a pee, which meant walking sideways across the slope in a crouched position to avoid slipping. This wasn't easy wearing Crocs, and when I reached open air to begin operations, a gale blew my urine into my shirt and face. Despite this, and vehicles hissing past on the wet road, we slept well, no doubt relaxed at the thought of a dry night. Bridge life held much potential. Now out of the Smokies, we enjoyed warmer conditions at the 3,000 feet mark. I continued walking with PJ and Philip, and the familiar faces I'd befriended crossed my path. Bowser, Daffy, Byline, Farnsworth, Mary Poppins, Lady Forward, Pops and Earthling, to name a few. A constant stream of new characters entered my world. Still searching for wild ramps, Philip struck gold after passing the Clyde Smith shelter. Preoccupied admiring the golden ragwort, whose yellow flowers carpeted sections of the trail, he stopped abruptly, causing me to bump into him. "Fozzie, are these ramps?" We sniffed, prodded, stroked and studied. The slender, vibrant green leaves thinned into red stems before merging to white near the soil. We smelt one. Undeniably, it was an onion. We searched for images on our phones before confirmation. We'd found ramps. We were ravenous and collected a few for dinner, foraging respectfully, picking a few leaves and relieving the roots. We toiled up the steep 2,000-foot climb to summit Roan High Knob. The spring addressed our borderline dehydration, and we gulped water as though we hadn't drunk for days. Peering into our food bags, we checked the culinary possibilities. I had few options, but Philip produced a bag of sliced salami and a sachet of olive oil. The meat sizzled in the hot fat and the ramps caramelised. A wonderful aroma of fried onions acted as a homing beacon for a few day hikers. We handed them our surplus stock and devoured our newfound source of fresh, wild sustenance with gusto, licking our lips. After Roan High Knob, the AT opened out and entertained the claustrophobics. The trail twisted, turned, and I bowed to its whims, revelling in the wide open spaces. I passed the imposing over-mountain shelter, dipped into short sections of woodland and onto vast, boulder-speckled moors. I crossed into Tennessee, which reminded me of the Yorkshire Moors, Dartmoor and the South Downs rolled into one. With the sun on my face, I ran my hands against bushes, now covered with leaves, thriving in the warm sunshine. A lost ivory cloud contrasted against a deep blue sky, highlighted by rounded hills intense with green. May was battling the elements, and winter, defeated, sulked and faded. The days shined brighter. Hikers started in sunshine and enjoyed extended, warmer evenings. Summer loomed, a long-forgotten friend returning from far away, and although we relished the warmth, little did we know what lay in store. After the Smokies, talk turned to a man called Bob Peoples. Respected for maintaining a long trail segment around where he lives at the Kincora Hostel, he's a legend in hiking circles. Quotes pay homage to him in nearby shelters. When Bob Peoples stays in a shelter, the mice bring him their food, or the bears hang Bob Peoples' food bag for him. Since 1988, he's logged several thousand miles repairing the AT. Every May, through hikers join him for a 2-day intensive trail maintenance event known as Hardcore Kincora. His hostel on Dennis Cove Road asks a mere $5 donation, which includes a bed, shower, laundry, use of the kitchen and rides into town. I arrived late evening as Bob was making a shuttle run, so I never met him. Byline and PJ were suffering from upset stomachs, blaming a pizza. Philip checked on his lasagna in the oven. The label advised it fed 5, but he planned to consume the lot, while Lord Horatio Farnsworth cooked a healthy lentil stew with Margaret. Cats' layers everywhere. Postcards from earlier hikers covered the walls. I sat outside after enjoying a hot shower, relishing the quiet around Kincora. Philip looked despondent and missed a few luxuries. There should be Wi-Fi in the shelters, he began, and electrical outlets. They should clear the path 5 feet wide with an awning over the entire trail. Well rested, I started at dawn, descending sharply from the hostel to Laurel Falls. The 80-feet-high spectacle is named after the local laurel bushes. The humidity sapped my strength as sweat dampened my shirt. I climbed, struggling towards Pond Flats, where Deep rested with Further, who pointed out his trail name had 2 U's. We tried naming Deep Arnie, as in Schwarzenegger, because of his low voice, but he rejected it. They sat by a fresh spring drinking the cool water like nature's own bar. Deep left before us, but returned looking shaken. I saw his ashen expression. "You okay?" "No, there's an enormous snake," he replied, stony face. Further walked along the trail as I tucked him behind. Rattlesnakes weren't new to him, and he approached cautiously. A large specimen basked, nursing a bulging stomach, no doubt the remnants of lunch. "Dang," he exclaimed. "Biggest goddamn snake I ever saw." As we crept closer, it rattled, but docile from its meal, stayed put. Dangerous wildlife is why cameras have a zoom function, and I snapped away before retreating. I passed Iron Mountain Shelter, enjoying a flat trail when I spotted a stone pillar with a gravestone embedded in the side. I inspected the inscription. Uncle Nick Grindstaff, born December the 26th, 1851, died July 22nd, 1923. Lived alone, suffered alone, and died alone. The words sparked my curiosity, and I took a photo but couldn't find any details until I returned home. Nick lived alone on the ridge between Stony Creek and Doe Valley for 40 years. Orphaned as a child, relatives raised him until adulthood, when he married and inherited part of the family farm. He made a living farming for several years before moving to Missouri for reasons unclear. Some stories say his wife died or she left him. Further accounts suggest he lost his possessions after a robbery. He returned to Iron Mountain for his remaining years as a hermit with his dog Panther, a horse, and a pet rattlesnake. In July 1923, his friend Baxter McEwen stopped by to check on Nick, but found him dead. Panther, guarding the body, had to be prized from his vigil. To this day, we don't know how he died. Relatives built the memorial we now see on Iron Mountain. To add to the legend, after they constructed the AT, reports of a dog howling were common. You've got to love a good mystery. I'd only managed 16 miles in 8 hours and was sweating copiously. The air was oppressive and shelters weren't the only targets. We now focused on water sources too. Over a hot summer, creeks dry up and water becomes a valuable commodity. It was only May, but temperatures had risen and we suffered. Instead of food fantasies, our attention turned to our favourite drinks. PJ relayed his obsession, an ice-cold cranberry juice, as he left me at the TN91. I planned on a ride to Shady Valley, 3 miles away. A local called Kirby dropped me off at the store and I ventured into air-conditioned coolness. Signs offered a deli, fuel, general merchandise, restrooms, and home of the Shady Dog, whatever that was. A Coke suppressed my immediate thirst crisis, and I devoured 2 hamburgers before resupplying and grabbing a carton of cranberry juice. I was back on trail in an hour after another quick ride to the trailhead with Joe, a local section hiker. Lord Horatio Farnsworth passed as I adjusted my laces, commenting on the cranberry juice, condensation bubbles forming on the cotton. I wrapped it in my jacket to keep it chilled. "Man, that looks good," he cried. "It does. I'll surprise PJ with it," I explained. "He's been hankering after one for days." I had 4 miles to the Double Springs shelter and strolled through yellow-coloured meadows splattered with buttercups and dandelions. Hikers congregated at a spring, taking advantage of the cool water. I figured word may have reached PJ, and as I approached he jogged over excitedly. "Fozzie," he exclaimed with a desperate expression that only a cold fruit juice on a scorching afternoon could encourage. "I heard you got me cranberry juice." He appeared so parched I expected him to dribble. Alas for poor PJ's salvation. Salvation wasn't imminent. I looked despondent to hint at grim news. "Yes, PJ, I did." His eyes widened in anticipation. "Problem is, I drank it." His expression changed to shock and disappointment. "Sorry, mate, but the last 3 miles were stinking hot, and what with the salt from the burgers, I couldn't resist. PJ, I'm sorry, I'll buy you another one." He stared at me in disbelief, saying nothing. "PJ, come on, don't make me feel guilty. I drank it, but at least I bought it for you in the first place." The explanation didn't offer any consolation. Lord Horatio Farnsworth laughed. "Fozzie, I can't believe you did that." An uncomfortable silence hung, during which I feared PJ might throttle me, but he laughed, along with everyone else. "Fozzie, I'm messing with you. It was nice of you to buy it. Don't worry, it's all good." I camped near the Abingdon Gap shelter, waking at 4:30 a.m. as a group of hikers left early. I couldn't sleep, hearing an animal around camp. Too scared to peer under the tent, I retreated inside my sleeping bag and prayed. The chatter was rife in the morning as others recounted similar stories, including Margaret. She showed me her knife. I heard it too, and had my knife ready in case. "Blimey," I retorted. "Remind me not to creep into your tent during the night." I talked to Cheddar, an unfamiliar face, so named after his fondness for my native English cheese. "It has a great reputation," I said, "but my favourite is Stilton." He looked interested. "What's it like?" "Softer, creamier, smellier, and with blue mould running through it. As far as English cheeses go, it's the champion." With his curiosity aroused, I thought altering someone's trail name, instead of thinking of new ones, could catch on. I continued. "Superior to Cheddar. You could consider changing your name to Stilton. It'll show off your cheese knowledge." I left him to ponder the idea and headed off with Philip, who told me he'd named himself Lasagna, which he spelt with a Z. He'd decided after his mammoth dinner at Kinkora. We were excited, and for good reason. Damascus lay a few miles away. It's famous for Trail Days, an annual event where thousands of hikers, both past and present, converge on this Virginian town, swelling the population from 900 to 20,000. Most camp in town and enjoy huge campfires, food and drink, foot washes, medical checkups, and a host of other services laid on by the community. Unfortunately, we were too early by 10 days, but we planned to carry on north and return for the experience. I liked Damascus. Pastel-shaded timber houses with well-kept gardens lined the main street as spring flowers danced by picket fences. The trails bustled with joggers, cyclists and dog walkers. The town sat in the green folds of the surrounding hills as crowds created occasional heat respites. We stayed at a hostel called The Place, run by the Methodist Church, and took a zero. I shared a room with PJ, Lasagna and Shay 11, the first English guy I'd met. We swapped news, especially our respective football team's performance. Aged 20, he'd worked for the railways at Leeds train station and Debenham's department store. He spoke fondly of his brother, who suffered from cerebral palsy. Choosing his words carefully, he appeared at ease in his life. Our room, positioned at the top of the stairs, offered a perfect view of everyone and became known as the reception. If we fancied a chat, or they did, we called them. Lady Forward's head popped around the door, and we discussed who'd be the first to summit Katahdin. The AT wasn't a race, and we didn't care who'd finish first, but we defended our egos when provoked. With light-hearted banter, she claimed she'd be first. "Are you throwing down the gauntlet?" I probed. "Yes, and remember, whoever's behind has to carry it," she retorted, "and it's freaking heavy." I agreed. It's a done deal. She approached, smirking, and handed over an imaginary gauntlet. I feigned surprise. This thing's huge. Whoever's carrying it will be at a serious disadvantage. I know, she replied. That's why you have it, because I'm leaving. See you on the trail. Nito loitered outside the gas station and joined me as I left Damascus. He had short, curly black hair and spoke with a Latin accent, sounding like a gangster. He made agreeable company, and we sped along the flatter section between Bear Branch Road and the Kincora hiking hostel. He offered me a shot of bourbon, which I accepted. We rarely carried alcohol because of the weight, so opportunities were welcome. He looked despondent. I need to lose pack weight. The bourbon's yours if you can carry it. It was a fair-sized bottle, and even though an evening tipple appealed, I thanked him, but declined. The rain started, and, feeling stubborn, I delayed donning my waterproofs until it intensified. I removed my pack, slid into my poncho, and deployed the umbrella. Typical, I thought, as the shelter appeared around the next corner. Daffy arrived to everyone's surprise, as we hadn't seen him for days, and PJ hugged him for an eternity. Nito approached as I made camp, urgency and impatience creasing his furrows. Fozzie, you got any TP? Any what? What's TP? Toilet paper. Embarrassed, he spoke softly so no one heard and paced agitatedly. Nito, me old mate, do you need the bog? Yes, I'm desperate. I can trade you, I've run out. Happy to offer some TP out of kindness, I expected nothing in return. However, he needed the toilet urgently, and as he'd mentioned the trade word, I shamelessly grabbed the opportunity. Well, let me see. I'd love a dram of bourbon, and is that a pack of dehydrated vegetables? How much do you need? I rummaged in my bag for the paper. 6 squares will do it, he implored. 6? I offered in surprise. That's impressive, mate. I'd struggle. I'd double up too, in case of rips, and you may need more tomorrow. Nito approached, borderline panic. Fozzie, that's fine. Here's a bourbon and veggies. I counted out several squares, slower than I should have, and handed them over, and he raced to the privy like a runner grabbing the baton in an Olympic final. TP sold in minimum 2 roll packs, which took too much space, so usually we obtained a little from public toilets. I had an inferior quality roll which I hadn't used. The thickness concerned me, as did its rough texture. I expected bad karma for my greed, especially it was only 1 ply. Lasagna sauntered over as I cooked my dinner. Chess, Fozzie? Sure, take a view. We'd wanted a travel chessboard but discounted it because of the bulk, before realising we could download the game to our phones. The England versus America competition had started, and if a session lasted too long, say past hiker midnight, we carried on the next day. We shared the same skill level, poor amateurs, so enjoyed balanced matches. After 2 games we'd drawn at 1 each. As I checked my meal cooking, he'd move and hand me the phone. I perused my options as he chatted with Daffy and pitched his hammock. A game often stretched over 2 evenings. At game over, a deadpan, computerised, synthesised voice exclaimed, "Checkmate!" The victor held the phone aloft, smiling smugly. Lasagna, finalising his options, made the killer move. It was 2-1 to the States. Checkmate. Lasagna's playful ego and his desire to rub in his triumph continued the following morning. As I woke and contemplated the day ahead, footsteps crept to my tent. They paused, close by, and, as I cocked one ear, the immortal electronic voice wafted through the woods. Checkmate. Lasagna giggled like a school kid. See you later, Fozzie. When the AT broke from the woods' seclusion, we revelled in a newfound freedom. The open spaces, treats along our journey, offered rare glimpses of the countryside. A new playground excited us. A pathway cut over the landscape, visible from miles away. A dirt track or silvery grass flattened by the boots of others. We could see the trail ascending, descending, or skirting mountains. We saw friends ahead and behind and giggled like children at the change of scenery. One such place was the Grayson Highlands in Virginia. Regarded as a trail highlight, it leaves lasting memories with thru-hikers. The 4,522-acre park includes Mount Rogers and White Top Mountain, Virginia's 2 highest peaks. Leaving the woods, it caught me by surprise. The glare blinded me, the heat hit, and I scrabbled around for my shades and sun cream. This is fantastic. Look at all this space. I'd lost track of Daffy again, hearing through the hiker grapevine he was 2 days behind. I'd no idea of Lasagna's whereabouts, and rumours suggested PJ had slowed, suffering from footache. I enjoyed their company, but the nomad kicked in, and I yearned for solitude and quiet. Grayson offered both. The light was mesmerising. Morning sun rays probed like searchlights splicing through low mists. Dew glistened on wet grass, infinite clusters of sparkling jewels, and clouds drifted lazily across the landscape, mottling the highlands. I saw weather patterns miles distant as brooding storms tormented Virginia. Ponies roamed Grayson, introduced to control the grass, and most were used to humans. Stopping for breaks and rustling a food bag, a curious few approached, hoping for a titbit and a few strokes. I pitched near the wise shelter. After tallying my distance, another 100 miles had passed, bringing the total to 500. I'd hiked nearly a quarter of the trail. Rain fell overnight, sounding heavier because I had no trees for protection. After lying in my tent waiting for it to stop, I gave in and left, squelching along a deluged trail, bemoaning my wet feet. I reached a livestock corral and made a beeline for the privy's overhanging roof. Snot Rocket and Anchor sheltered with me as we peeled off waterproofs, steam rising from our bodies, grateful for the release. I walked with tripping Yeti in the afternoon, and as the storm blew over, I observed how the environment returned to life. Where the tree canopy thinned, the residual drips stopped, and in denser woods, water smacked my head. The sun emerged to dry the land, rising steam humidified the air, and wet foliage appeared polished. Finally, birds sang and insects buzzed around me. Like through hikers hiding from a storm, we tentatively peeked from our shelters and ventured out once more.